Welcome to BAM It with John Michael and Mari, covering all things business, accounting, management, marketing, and IT, the place where businesses and entrepreneurs find the forest through the trees.
Hey guys, and welcome to BAM It. I am John Michael Cletus, and I'm with...
You're with Peridot Consulting.
No, I'm with Peridot Consulting, but I'm physically with, right now...
Mari Peterson of Marketing Outpost.
You're missing your cue, Mari. And today's episode, we're doing another quick off-topic about fishing, and this is Mari's off-topic episode. We just did the coffee one a few episodes ago, and that was mine, and Mari gets to do hers now, which is fishing. With what I'm referring to is a little bit of a metaphor lead-in, because there's some metaphors in fishing, right?
I'm just going to cruelly leave you hanging there. Yes, there are some metaphors in fishing.
This is your off-topic. I can talk about fishing if you want me to.
Do you fish?
I grew up fishing.
What kind of fishing?
Trout, bass. I mean, just lake fishing.
Freshwater fishing.
Yeah, freshwater fishing.
Okay.
Used to go to Canada a few times and do some of those glacier lakes up there. And my father and brother are huge into fishing. They do 1 or 2 trips a year to fly. They fly fish, and they've been in New Zealand, Russia, Chile.
Did you like it when you were doing it?
The problem is I do not like fish, like to eat fish. I don't like it. And I did, my brother and my father loved it, and there's a big thing with them, and I was always just pulled along. And I never liked to fish, so what happened is we would go on these like camping trips, and we'd have to catch what we eat, and I would always end up just eating nothing.
You're like wanting to catch some chicken.
Yeah, exactly. Where's the chicken nuggets? No, yes, I enjoy it. It's a great thing. I just don't do it in my adult life. I just really just did it when I was brought along as a child, because my father and brother did that. They still do that. I'll fish every now and then, but I know all about it, or not know all about it, but I grew up doing it a lot.
Well, and that's the point. I think a lot of people think of fishing as a hobby. It is a hobby. I know that some people monetize their hobby by sports fishing, and they do competitive fishing. I don't do competitive fishing. So talking about your background and history, you were fishing from when you were a little boy, right? Mm-hmm. And then you, I guess, quit as an adult when you no longer had to be drug along these trips.
Yeah, and I feel bad because I don't take my kids fishing. I don't do that, and I kind of feel bad about that. But
this is not a therapy session.
Sorry.
Just teasing. So we got into the topic of, we both were talking about, what are we going to talk about on our off topics? And we decided we both picked something that we really like, enjoy, or seem to know about that doesn't have anything to do with our business. So my topic was fishing, but I also do look at fishing from a marketing perspective. And I guess because you spend so much time standing there that you do have nothing to do but think. And so for me, I always think about business for some reason, and I think about marketing. So my fishing background began when I was, I guess, in 3rd grade. And I remember that specifically because I had a gymnastics.
That's like 8 years old, right?
Yeah.
8, 9.
I had a gymnastics teacher, and I used to hang out with them a lot, even when I wasn't doing gymnastics. And so this was in Beaufort, South Carolina. And so they would take me fishing a lot. Their house was near the water, if I recall. But they would take me fishing, and we would get in his, he delivered electricity, or he delivered gas actually to Defusky Island. So we'd get up really early in the morning.
So you're talking about ocean fishing?
Let me finish.
Oh.
My story, please. So we would get on his shrimp boat and deliver gas to Defusky Island because it didn't have any electricity. And so we'd get up really early in the morning, which I'm not a morning person, but I always enjoyed that part because it was really nice to get out there. And then he taught me how to fish. So I would hang out with her sons, and we would go early in the morning, go shrimping. So we'd get in a little John boat and go at like 4 or 5 in the morning and go fishing for shrimp. And basically, you just don't really have to do anything. They just jump in the boat with you.
Oh, wow.
And so you cast out a net, and you get a lot of fish that way. And he also taught us how to gig for flounder. That was a lot of fun because basically you're in that John boat with just a light and you have to pay really close attention and look kind of for the outline of a flounder on the bottom. And he also taught us how to crab. So we would crab off the end of the pier and we would just use chicken neck and, just a lot of fun. So
chicken neck?
Yeah, chicken necks. Bait. Yeah, as bait for your crab. And so we would put that in a little net and, those are just memories I really enjoyed. We spent a lot of time on the water. And so flash forward, I think you get into school. I wasn't near fishing that much and all of that. But as an adult, I got back into fishing with my husband. And so the first time that I met him, we started going to the beach a lot. And then he loved to fish. And so I sort of got back into it with him because he liked to surf fish. So
what's surf fishing?
Surf fishing is you fish off the front of the beach. You don't get in a boat, but you have your equipment and you surf fish off the front of the beach.
And you catch, is that where you snag a bunch of swimmers and?
Yeah, I like to catch a bunch of unsuspecting swimmers and children.
Because I'll be at the beach and there'll be somebody fishing next to me. And I'm like, what are you doing? My son's wakeboarding right here. What are you doing with a fishing line?
Well, now see, that's rude. Whoever is there first gets to stay there. But usually what we do is we move away from the crowds. We actually don't do that. We will try to find a spot along the beach that's not right where all the families go, and we move further down or away from the crowds because you don't want to be fishing near the kids.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be like, look up and like, no, my kid's doing fine. He's wakeboarding. And right next to him, some guy's like casting line. And I'm like, hold up now. What is...
I agree. I think there's sometimes you get into some sort of territorial issue there, who was there first. But we're nice. We always move away from the crowds and try not to be fishing right there with the families and stuff. And really, you don't want to be near the kids because that actually disrupts the fishing anyway. So
I would assume, yeah.
Yeah. So we like to surf fish, and then we do a lot of inland fishing, which is in the waterways that come in from the ocean. So we are saltwater fishing. I don't like deep sea fishing, actually, and I've done some of that. You get out on a boat and you have an outrigger, and basically you're just trolling. You can, if you smell that diesel fuel, you can get sick.
Or you're just rocking in a bit. It's very stereotypical that you get extremely seasick.
I have a feeling you get seasick.
I don't.
Have you ever
I've actually been deep sea fishing, and as long as I'm standing on the boat, I'm fine. But I get very car sick. It's very ironic. Seasick, no. Car sick, yes. But keep going.
Back to John Michael. Anyway, so I don't like deep sea fishing as much. I like to be more, I guess, active in it, and I see deep sea fishing as you're just trolling, and then you get a bite, and then you're just basically holding on to the rod, but it's not nearly as involved for me, and maybe I'm just not doing that right, but it just doesn't do as much for me. So I like to surf fish and I like to inland fish, and I have tried fly fishing, but the problem with fly fishing is you are it's so involved in it, you have no hands that are free. Which means I can't hold my drink.
Yeah, that's important.
I'm sort of a lazy kind of fishing girl because I like to have my, vodka in one hand and my pole in the other. Or you can put your pole in a sissy stick and literally just sit there and watch and kind of, chill out for a little bit. So I'm kind of one of those. Fly fishing, you have to be very involved. It's constant movement.
It's very sport.
And your hands are constantly active in that. So it cuts down on the drinking time.
The nice thing about fishing, from my perspective, and this sounds like it. You're hanging out at the beach, anyways. If you're not fishing, you're hanging out at the beach, you're laying in the sun. But at least if you include fishing, at least there's a little bit of, you can still hang out at the beach, still have your drink, still have fun, but you're also just engaging in a little bit more of an activity that could be as engaging or not engaging as you want it to be in any specific time. Is that sort of accurate?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've had family with me and they're just hanging out on the beach with us and watching. And, I think that's how we fish. We're not one of those like get up at the crack of dawn and go fishing and have to do that.
That's what I would do growing up. And it just really, like, we would get up and my dad would have us like out till 3 a.m. on some boat. And I was like 8.
I could see that.
And I don't even like fish.
Well, now see, there's your conundrum too there. If you don't actually like to eat the fish, then I could see why in the heck am I out here doing all of this?
I was always a catch and release guy. Yeah.
So, well, we love to eat it, and that's one thing that we do. We will catch and release, but we also, if we can keep it and it's within the legal limits, we often do.
So what are the legal limits?
Well, every fish type has a different legal limit. So, in South Carolina, where we fish a lot, we catch a lot of red drum, or they call it spot tail, and sometimes they'll call it spotted sea bass. But what we do with that is, I think the legal limit is 2 per person, and within 15 to 23 inches long is the legal limit. So if it's under 15 inches, you can't keep it. If it's over that,
So
you
all
can't keep
all
it.
yours are under, and you have to throw them back. Is that?
Well, that wasn't very nice. I guess you're trying to say I'm not very good at it.
I've never understood, like, the better fisherman catches the bigger fish. Why is that? Bigger fish are harder to catch?
Okay, so let's get into that. So part of the whole fishing thing is, I think your style of fishing and what type of fishing you like says a lot about you and your style. So my husband and I both like to fish, but he is a bigger risk taker than I am. He likes to try to, in a way, sports fish. He likes to try to get sharks, and he likes to get the bigger fish. So he will always use an ocean rod, and then he uses a bigger bait, and he has to go out deeper into the water. It's better to do it at high tide, and he casts way, way, way out. But it takes a lot longer. So he is very patient, and he will wait and wait and wait, and often he is successful, but it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience. It takes the right equipment and a different kind of bait. Whereas me, I want dinner. So I will not cast so far, and I don't have that kind of patience. I want to catch something that I can, cook later or freeze and eat later. So for me, I will end up casting my rod a lot more frequently. I use a different kind of bait, and I will use different styles of fishing in order for me to get dinner.
So smaller fish are just easier to catch, is that?
That's true.
Yeah.
So let's tie that back to marketing. So when it comes to fishing, it comes to any kind of hobby. I don't care if you're a runner, a hiker, a biker, whatever it is, what is the first thing that they will tell you about that hobby? You have to have the right equipment, correct? So somebody who just is a hiker that hikes, a couple of miles is very different from somebody who hikes the whole Appalachian Trail and does that for 2 weeks. That are going to take different kinds of equipment with different kinds of clothing. So the first thing is having the right equipment, and then the second thing is having the right bait when it comes to fishing. So if I use too big a bait, the fish that I'm going after, if it's a sea bass or something, and the bait's too big, well, that's not how they eat. So it's not going to be as attractive to them. So if you are going for a bigger fish, you do use a bigger bait because that's attractive to them. Sharks don't go after little shrimp. So that is when you're saying, what kind of thing do you do for a bigger fish or a smaller fish? That's what you do. So
are we talking about fishing or marketing?
Well, now we're talking about marketing.
No, I know
too.
that's. When you're talking about it, I'm visualizing marketing in this.
So when I think about the fishing and how it's tied to marketing, I think about your target customer, and this is where I tie fishing back to marketing, because usually if you ask a client, a new marketing consulting client for me, I'll say, well, okay, one of the things we're going to identify after I have a clear understanding of your product or your service that you sell, who is your target customer? So, okay, they're going to tell me my target customer is between, 30 and 50, and they like to do certain hobbies and activities. They live in certain lifestyles and so forth. Okay, that's how you identify your target customer. But it's very different when you say, okay, what's the strategy for that specific target customer? So this is where the location, timing, weather have to do affects fishing, affects your target customer. So let me give you an example. If you are fishing for a smaller fish, and you're inland fishing, we pay close attention to the weather. So the weather is your environmental conditions. So you have to ask yourself with your target customer, what are the environmental conditions that might affect your customer? Okay, so in this case, I'm going after a smaller fish, and so the weather could have a huge impact if it's really windy, if it is really hot. So like July is actually not a good time to fish because it is so extremely hot, the fish go deeper to find cooler water. So when you think about that, you think, that is the environmental conditions. So the first thing you always look at is the weather. The second thing you look at is the tide. So a low tide versus a high tide, an incoming versus outgoing tide, that is going to affect, where and how you fish and when you fish. Well, your customer is the same way. They go through cycles. So if your business customer is somebody that is highly in tune to their business cycle, you don't fish for that customer when it's off of their cycle. So that is the same way that kind of like the timing of the tides affect your customer. Another thing is location. So if I want sea bass, I'm not going to catch that being in a boat way out in the ocean. You're going to catch sports fish out in the ocean. So we stay closer to on the beach. It's actually harder on the beach. It's actually easier if I go inland into the waterways. So for me, if I really want dinner, the best thing to do is go inland closer to piers and docks and structures and stuff like that to get that kind of fish. Let's say I want, not groupers way out in the ocean, but let's say I want to have black drum fish. It's actually a really good fish to eat. They have these really sharp teeth and they're really big. And so for them, they like to be around structures because they gnaw on barnacles and they, that's how that fish likes to hunt and do its thing. So if you're going for that particular kind of fish, you have to go to their right location. So target customer is the same way. You need to know that you are fishing in the right location for that customer. So don't be surprised if you're going for a small business person, but you're fishing in a big city, you're not going to necessarily it's going to be harder to kind of locate that customer and where they hang out, So fishing is knowing where your kind of fish that you want hangs out. And that's the same thing with a target customer and choosing location.
And that's in many ways hard to do. I mean, if you're somebody that's brand new to fishing in this metaphor, I don't know that fish is next to the pier, or I don't know that fish is in the ocean. And in many ways, that's why you need to maybe find somebody that is a professional fisherman, or in this case, a professional marketer, to know how to find those fish and know where you're going. Because if you're just, in many ways, if you're like, well, I'm going to do Instagram, I'm going to do Facebook, you don't know you're fishing in the wrong pond. For all you know, you're fishing in a swimming pool that's going to absolutely do nothing for you, but you don't know it. And you bought this really cool fishing rod to do it, and this really fancy bait, and you're fishing in the shallow end of the swimming pool because you just honestly don't know what the heck you're doing.
Well, and to take that example further, if you're on Facebook and Instagram and you create an ad, the ads let you specify specific target locations. So in that case, you would say, okay, my customer base is within a 50-mile radius. So you want to make sure when you set up your ad for your customer that you have selected only people who are within a 50-mile radius of your business location. Another option in there is interests or hobbies that people like on Facebook that they have said. So let's say your target customer is an outdoor person. Let's say I'm going to start a business and I'm going to be a Sherpa guide, a hiking guide. So in a Facebook ad, I would select other people that like outdoor activities, hiking, cycling, biking, walking, those kind of things to target that customer. Because really that is when you choose advertising options, that's what you're doing is where does my customer hang out? Where do they look? Are they reading this and seeing that? Maybe that customer is not going to be watching a lot of TV, but they're going to probably be looking at a lot of outdoor magazines, or they're going to go to outdoor fishing or supply places, So you might want to advertise or be close to those kind of places. So target customer has so much to do with that location, and fishing is actually just as fine-tuned. So when you want to go after a particular fish, so let's say flounder, you really need to be closer to shallow waters. You're not going to get flounder way, way, way out, So that is why you say, okay, I want flounder. I need to be near rocks. I need to be near some shallower waters. And then you have to understand, here's the really key piece about fishing that I really love. You have to understand their behavior. So we have hired fishing guides, and that's actually helped us quite a bit because the fishing guides teach you a lot about the behavior of specific types of fish. So that's how we learn so much about black drum and their teeth, and they have a small mouth but really big teeth, so they tend to gnaw and chew. And so when you're fishing, you'll feel like a couple of little pulls on your bait, but you shouldn't pull it yet because what they're doing is just kind of testing it out and kind of gnawing at it a little bit, so you kind of wait a little bit. You have to be patient, and then that's what we call what's the technical term in the fishing when you actually hook the bait and you hook the fish. And another thing about that is like flounder. They're on the bottom. They're very slow. Their eyesight's not really good, and so it's about scent, and it's about
So am I the flounder of the...
So in that case, what you do is you sort of drag your bait along the bottom of the sea floor, and then what happens is it sort of kind of gets near them, and they'll just kind of pop up and grab the bait. But then what happens is they don't move a lot, so sometimes you don't even know you've got it on there.
Sounds like I think I'm the flounder.
Whereas a lot of people love to catch something like red drum or sea bass because they give a lot more fight. So there's a lot more action, and when you've got something on there. So on the front of the beach, you catch a lot of skate, and those are the fish that are like very wide, and they have a long tail, and their mouth is on the bottom. It almost looks like a human mouth. But when they catch, you almost instantly know you've caught one because your line doesn't jerk and pull a lot. It literally kind of sinks to the ocean floor, and they hug the bottom of the ocean. And it's almost like a big suction cup. And they sort of suction themselves to the bottom of the ocean floor, and they're very hard to kind of pull up. And so you kind of have to gently tug, and you just play a wearing out game. You reel them in, and then, of course, we unhook them and put them back in the ocean. So I think when you fish, you are so in tune with the behavior of your particular type of fish that you were going after. And that's why I always think about marketing, because your target customer also has certain behaviors. They're going to do certain things. Somebody who leads a sedentary lifestyle is very different from somebody who leads an outdoor active lifestyle. What they do, their interests, and when they do them are going to be completely different. And so if you understand the behavior of your target customer, much like you understand the behavior of your target fish you're going after, you're going to be more successful.
And you're going to know the equipment to get, the bait to use, and every now and then you'll catch skate that you have to throw back.
Right. And you also have to understand the seasons and the cycles. So when we fish a lot in South Carolina, we understand during certain seasons you're going to have a different kind of fish that's kind of running through that area. You'll also understand there are certain times you want to avoid, so you're like, okay, right now it's October, there's going to be a lot of jellyfish. You're going to be tangling around with that. Maybe you don't want to get in the water. So you do a lot more inland fishing, but you also know in July it's too hot. So you need to go into places where there's a lot more shade and there's some structure and maybe some deeper waters, in the inland waterways. So these are all things that are so fine-tuned, and the more that you do it, then you realize, okay, I can do certain things, and you can actually target a very specific type of fish. So recently we met this fishing guide who was actually born and raised in South Carolina, like literally on the waterways. He was born and raised on Goat Island, which the only way to get to Goat Island is by a boat.
By a goat?
Not by a goat, but by a boat. Anyway, this guy is probably the best fishing guide I've ever had, and I called him the grocery store of fishing, because you could say to this guy, well, we want to catch black drum, and he literally knew exactly where to go, and by God, within 15 minutes, we'd catch a black drum. And then I'd say, well, we want to catch some sea bass or something like that, and he'd say, okay, we're going over here. And he knew exactly where to go and exactly what to do, and he changed his technique slightly.
It's probably where he had the holes. He probably just had a hole there.
No, John Michael, you can't pre-stock inland water fishing.
Tourists coming down. He's like, oh, I got sea bass over here.
Yeah, he's got them tied to the pier at the bottom. But this guy was so in tune with all the different species of fish. It was really quite remarkable. And that is when you're really good at what you're doing. So sometimes it is good to hire like a fishing guide or a marketing consultant who has really done the research and understands different target customer profiles, because you will be more successful then in getting that. So it's not always wise to think, oh, I'm just going to take out a really big fishing rod and a big bait and get what I want. No, you're going to get whatever that bait and that is going for.
Yeah, and maybe even nothing. I mean, like we were saying, like you got to know first to fish in the ocean, and then you got to know to fish over here, and then you got to, and it's defining that target. It's hard to say I want to go after that sea bass. It's hard to define, because if it's really hard to figure that out sometimes. A lot of people will say when they're doing their business, of course I want X, Y, and Z. That's my client. But if you really, that's like saying I want fish. I want fish. That's what I want. Well, fine. You're catch fish. But what specifically do you want? If you narrow that down, maybe one fish is the one that's for you. And if you really learn that one fish, sure, you'll still catch the other fish, and that'll be fine, and you'll still eat dinner that night. But that one fish that's going to feed your family longest is the one you need to try to define.
Well, and that also goes back to sales. So when I consult with clients, and let's say their target customer is a small client, I would say small meaning like it's not a corporate client, So I see corporate clients. If I wanted to get a really big corporate account in my marketing firm, I would see them like a shark. And so I know that my strategy is going to be completely different. I also know that the time horizon of getting that kind of client is going to be longer. I also know that I'm going to have to be a lot more patient. And I know I'm going to have to change my strategy on how I approach a corporate client versus a small business owner. And so those two to me are completely different. And so when I meet with a client, that's what I will often ask them. Are you a big fish in a small pond? Is your market a pond, a lake, an ocean, or a river? So let me expand upon that. I see Asheville sometimes as a small lake. It's got some really good fish in it, some medium-sized fish, some small fish, but really the biggest competition in a lake is like bottom-feeding catfish, and I guess there's some other big bass and stuff like that, largemouth bass.
Are you saying people in Asheville are bottom feeding?
No, I'm just saying that, your biggest competition in a lake is not a shark. Versus you go to somewhere like a big city, even Charlotte, Atlanta, New York, I consider them more like oceans, where you are going to have much bigger competition. And not that that's a bad thing, because even those places like sharks, what feeds off a shark, we call them feeder fish. There's a lot of big sharks in like Charlotte or New York or Atlanta, but they actually feed a lot of smaller businesses. So there's a lot of smaller businesses that sort of feed off of those bigger sharks. And so if you understand, well, what is your business? So for me, Marketing Outpost, I'm not a shark. I have most of my businesses are here in Asheville, my clients, so I'm not I would call myself like a small, type of, I would be a bottom feeding catfish. Actually, no, bottom feeding catfish just sits there with their big glassy eyeballs, and they're actually pretty lazy, whereas a bass is not lazy, and that's a completely different type of fish that's in there with them. But that's what I mean. My competition is not going to be some big shark, and that's what I mean by that. But I'm also not a big shark that's feeding other little fish versus, let's say, a marketing firm in Charlotte or a marketing firm in Atlanta, which also means that my client base, I'm not going to go after a big corporation. First of all, I couldn't handle it if I did. I don't have the resources or the equipment or the tools to do that.
Yeah. Got the right fishing rod.
Exactly. So you have to understand that. And I think that's where customers or my clients need to understand, well, who is your target customer? But also, what is your environment? Are you in a small pond? That's the biggest thing. Or are you in the ocean? Or do you want to go for that? Is your long-term marketing plan to be able to graduate from the pond to the lake to the ocean, because there are businesses that have done that. You know, we have, what is that stuff called? Kombucha. Those ladies started off, they're very small in this little pond, but guess what? They're now out there, I think, in the ocean, because their product is now in major grocery stores and expanding.
Well, and we've got Poppy's Popcorn as an example of that.
Yeah, so you've got all these different businesses that, you can start off small, but if your marketing goal is to graduate to the next level, that's how I see that. But then they have to understand, when they do graduate to that next level, you are in a different environment. If you have gone from being in a lake and now you're in the ocean, you better understand that the competition is completely different. You are now swimming in a whole different set of other species, and you better understand how that might affect or impact your business.
Yeah.
So that's what I have to say about fishing.
No, I've always heard you sort of say things in passing like, oh, okay, you're going for the big fish. Or, okay, that's the small fish. So it definitely, I'm glad we're doing this podcast for you to relate how it does just steer your philosophy towards marketing. And it helps in many ways. I think it's pretty cool that you take something that's relatable to you and yourself, and you apply it to what you're doing in a professional manner, and how it applies so well. And because you will say that to me, oh, that's a shark situation or something, which is neat. But you know, I've enjoyed hearing this story and the passion behind fishing, and you know.
Maybe now you'll take your kids out fishing.
Well, yeah.
And fishing really covers so many things. I mean, you know, younger kids really enjoy crabbing, and the shrimping was a whole lot of fun.
Well, you know, it's not like I go to the coast very often ever.
What about the lake?
Yeah, Beaver Lake area. What's the biggest fish you've ever caught?
Sharks.
You got sharks?
Well, in South Carolina, they're called bonnethead, and so they look like little baby hammerheads. But one summer, there were so many of them, and in one day, we caught 8.
What? And how big are these?
6 feet, 7 feet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they take a lot of work, but it was really interesting. It was just this whole school of bonnethead sharks going through the area, and it actually got obnoxious because they take a lot of energy, and you know, you're almost hoping they break the line, but they don't have the hook. So it's actually just a lot. I think people are always shocked when we are fishing on the front of the beach when we bring stuff in. People are like, oh my God, I didn't know that was out there.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what did you think was out in the ocean?
Yeah.
Or I've had people ask me,
I'd be scared if I saw somebody pulling a shark while I was just swimming.
I've seen sand sharks that are like 3 to 4 feet long, and they actually are just skimming right on the surface of the beach, and they just do that, you know. I guess
are those sharks aggressive? I mean, like, are they going to bite?
No, but what their eyesight isn't so great necessarily, but their mouths just kind of open up and go for whatever it is that they're smelling, or seeing. So what I tell people, some people ask me about their toddlers, you know, oh my God, I'm going to the beach and I heard there was, you know, these sharks, and I'm like, just don't be out there at dusk, you know, and you know, keep an eye out. But yeah, and I would go look at reports, and you can see if there's like a certain type of a fish going up and down, then I would probably like stay out of there, because they're not going after you. They're just doing their natural thing. And if your toes happen to be in the way, you know.
Yeah, because you always hear about these shark attacks on the coast. 2 or 3 years ago, I went to, maybe 4 years ago. Anyways, I went to Ocracoke on the coast in Outer Banks in North Carolina, and we left. And the following Monday of when we left, like very soon, like we were there, somebody got bit on that beach and got killed. And I was just thinking, I literally just left that, and I was in that beach with my kids, and it's scary.
Well, there actually was something when you're talking about that a few years ago, where there were about 8 different shark attacks along the coast, and they were actually coming down from Massachusetts and then into the North Carolina coast like you're talking about. And so there was actually a whole documentary I watched on that, because they were talking about trying to figure out what was causing that kind of unusual behavior. And that's something else, you know. likening back that to marketing, when you see unusual behavior, you kind of want to understand, well, what is causing that with your customer? Maybe it's a recession, maybe it's, a seasonal thing, maybe it's a weather thing,
Or it's a new thing or some innovations coming along that you're not realizing.
Exactly. So they were really studying that because there was a kind of unusual amount of shark bites and shark attacks. What's really cool is there's a website, I can't remember, it's Ocean something, but you can actually track all the great whites, and they have started tagging them. And there's one called Mari, I think, and she always goes from Massachusetts down to South Carolina. And actually, she goes down to Florida. But it was interesting tracking her because she got so close to Charleston and actually came in part of the way, really close into the harbor. And so everybody was kind of freaked out because what is this great white Mari doing so close to Charleston? So I like those kind of things because you can track that.
That's neat. I should check that out. Well,
you have any more questions about fishing?
I don't think I do. Are you done?
I'm done.
Any parting shots? Okay.
Well, I will say this. If I could, in my long-term dream, I think in my third career, the third career being when you retire, I could see myself doing fishing charters. And I'd like to expose, at one point I had an idea to do corporate retreats for women in fishing, but in my vision, I was going to have these really good-looking guys that would help you with your bait and hook your line. And then instead of chips and beer, we would have wine, champagne, and cheese and, fruit. What do you think of that?
I don't know why you think guys wouldn't like that, Mari. That's very...
Anyway, so one day when Mari's fishing charters start, I will invite everybody to it.
I think you're narrowing half the market. I think you can offer that to both. No, that's okay. Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us today. Please be sure to review this episode. And for more information on who we are or this podcast, please visit www.bammit.com. That's BAMM-IT.com. And our next podcast, we're going to be talking about business innovation. We're going to introduce the concept, define it a little bit, and hopefully by the end of the podcast, people have a much better understanding of what that means and how to spot it and how to maybe be innovative themselves. But we thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you.
The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice and is for entertainment purposes only. The hosts and guests of this podcast may make terrible attempts at being funny, and this podcast does not defend the merits of this humor, nor does it guarantee that the humor will be successful. It is not guaranteed that you will find this as entertaining as the hosts find themselves.